Record on this computer. Yeah, I think it's recording now. Okay. Good evening, everyone, or good day, everyone, depending on the country you are. Let me be generic at this point in time. This is another opportunity for us to gather together, learn, share, and grow. So today we'll be talking about HTTP clients in .NET. I think today's session is almost for developers. We're trying as much as possible not to make it streamlined to a particular group of people, but for today, I think it's for developers or intending developers. So the topic would be on HTTP clients in .NET, and the person anchoring today's session is no other person than Tunde. Tunde, please, the floor is open. Go ahead, sir.
All right, sir. Good evening.
Yeah.
So please confirm you can hear me. Sorry.
Yes, very well.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yes, as the
Okay, please. So today is on HTTP clients in .NET. So and let me just have an introduction. My name is Tunde. I'm a developer for Axis Bank, and I major basically on backend features. I think my project in Access, or my main project in Access, is the USSD channel. So, can you still hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, so HTTP clients I think like I stumbled on HTTP clients from someone called, I thought it would be on the call, but it's not on the call, LaCC. And it is basically how we backend developers use HTTP clients in .NET Core. Apparently, there are issues around it. So .NET themselves created something called HTTP Client Factory, which is what we are actually going to use today. But I didn't want to majorly talk about, I'm not going to talk about only HTTP Client Factory today. So we can, if there is someone here that's a JavaScript developer or any other developer, he can maybe go and implement his own HTTP Client Factory for his programming language. So HTTP, I think starting with it, to start these HTTP clients, we are going to have to understand, there is a question actually that someone asked me when I joined software development, which is basically when you enter a URL and you press enter, what happens? I don't know if anybody knows. Does anybody? Sonny, I'm actually going to ask you, Sonny, or what do you think? What do you know happens when you enter a URL and you press enter? The science behind it. What usually happens when we press www.google.com? What happens?
By my understanding, you're sending a GET request to the server that is hosting the resource that you are trying to access. So,
okay,
yeah, that's all right.
Okay, so for me, I think that day I know I said nonsense that day, and I just said that the google.com is waiting for you to send the request and they will respond and all that. But like, yeah, I think a lot of people do not know what actually happens. Like maybe they know it in their head, but they cannot explain it. And so basically, when we press www.google.com to our browser and we press enter, that's the www.google.com is basically a domain name, right? But behind it, there is a DNS that the domain name will be resolved around to a particular IP. On that IP is where we would have the protocol we are going to serve on, that's HTTP, and the URL itself, which is 192, a particular URL that represents our destination address. So when we do that, it gets to the server that it is expecting it, and that one, there are different things that I've skipped that actually happens in this particular thing, which is from it to your ISP and all that, how they resolve it. But basically, when it gets to the destination, sorry, can you still hear me?
Very well.
Okay, so when it gets to the destination address checks if
Hello. I think I can no longer hear you. Hello. Oh, is it from my end? Hello, Tunde, are you there?
I think it's disconnected somehow.
Okay.
Maybe his internet is flickering.
But please confirm you can hear me now. I think I went off a while.
Yes. You're now back.
So when did I stop? Okay, when did I stop, please?
Oh,
I think you're trying to mention what happens when you hit a get, DNS.
Okay. So yeah, okay. So after that, I said once the DNS resolves the IP to that particular domain name, it gets your destination address, then sends to your ISP. There are some other things that happen. You check what they call it. It has been cached before. If it has not, it sends to there are other places that it sends to before it gets to the destination. The destination address also now checks for what it is meant to render for you, the content it is meant to send back to the client before it now sends it back to the client. And your browser understands HTML, which now renders it if it is a front end, and if it is just a service, you also understand how you get your response through JSON and all those things, right? Then I think something else I would like to point out is the fact that it is so, for example, if you have like www.google.com, it is not just one connection that is going to get everything that we are seeing. So there are like different connections that happens between just our system and Google's server. So they're like different, it is multi-threaded basically. So one person is going to go and get what it's going to do, this part of what is going to display. Another one is going to get different things. Several connections exist to ensure what they call it, we get that display that we have on our system. Because I think that would also be needed later. So this now takes us to HTTP Client Factory. HTTP Client Factory came up with .NET. In .NET Core, it came up with .NET Core 2.1. And what they were trying to do was trying to resolve the problems we have with calling HTTP clients. So usually I know what everyone does is you just create your using statement to call your HTTP client. And since you are sure that anything that is in the using statement is inherited from my disposable, it will be disposed of after. That gives us the safety we think we have in our mind. But that does not actually happen. So first, creating different new instances of HTTP clients helps us think or gives us the idea that we are resolving problems that we do not know that actually exist, but it doesn't. So HTTP clients, creating the new client is not even the problem actually, but I'll also get to that part. But it now, before HTTP Client Factory came about, people now try to provide their own solution, which is the fact that since you are telling me that when I create new HTTP clients, it creates a problem that can lead to socket exhaustion. I'll get to what socket exhaustion is also. It can lead to socket exhaustion. Then I might as well just register HTTP client as a singleton in my startup, and that will not create any problem for me. I would just be using one instance throughout my lifetime. But that also creates a problem, which is the fact that your system would not be able to get DNS changes. So for example, if you are connected to a particular domain name, and for some systems, there is something they do called blue or green deployments, which I didn't go too deep into it, but it's basically the IP would have changed. But your own system would not know that the IP for this particular domain name has changed. So it's not getting DNS changes. And there's actually no solution for that. So registering HTTP client as a single thing is also not an option. Then they came up with HTTP client factory. HTTP client factory actually resolves the problem to a very large extent, because the problem itself is not the HTTP clients that we are creating new instances of. The problem is the connection pool, which happens every time we create new HTTP clients. So basically, the HTTP clients, what do you call it? The HTTP client uses something called HTTP client handler, which also uses something called HTTP message handler. HTTP message handler is simple. It just sends request message and gets response messages. The HTTP client handler is the one that creates the connection. So if I make create connection, I'm trying to send a request to Google. The request between me and Google, the HTTP client handler is one that sets up that connection between us. And this connection I'm talking about again now is going to take us deeper again into how we communicate. So when we communicate, we see, let's say my own IP address is 192.whatever, an IP address. Google has their own IP address, which we are going to communicate. So we already talked about how that happens. Even if you use www.google.com, it actually results in an IP address. So when it gets to that IP address, they do not talk on just IP address, because remember I mentioned that it is multi-threaded. So for you to just even have that display of google.com, there are different connections that are trying to take different things at the same time, and different things at a particular time, so that it will be faster. I'm sure that's why they did that. So they needed to get a deeper, what they call it, a deeper way of identifying the calling system and the responding system, because the connection itself is full duplex, which means I can send and receive. So this led to different systems identifying themselves by sockets. So this socket is going to get this socket is going to get this. That is why all those, what do you call it, the information they are getting would not clash with each other. You are going to go and get I'm thinking in my mind, you are going to go and get the font. You are going to go and get this particular thing. Different people, several connections between just me and Google trying to render a particular page. So we are identifying ourselves by sockets. Then, when you create new HTTP clients each time, it actually creates a new connection every time. Once you do, better going through REST client, those guys actually create new clients each time you what do you call it? You use HTTP clients, which means you are creating a new connection each time. So at a particular point, and why this is very important for me. Can you guys hear me? Sorry.
Sure, okay.
Okay, so for me, I'm a USSD developer, and I'm currently I'm working on something that would have different calls. So this is also very important for me. If you are working on a system that you know that would have several calls, I think it's very important you use HTTP client factory. So if it comes to your mind that when we are making several calls and we have this one has used all the sockets, sorry, it leads to socket exhaustion, and which means that system will not be able to take anything again. And it's a problem that could have been mitigated if you were using HTTP client factory. So that's where socket exhaustion came from, which is actually the problem of using HTTP clients just with our using statements. And iDisposable actually kills the connection. But the problem is, once iDisposable cannot kill the connection till after it even disposes it, the connection ends after about 240 milliseconds, which is the time to wait that exists. So even when we dispose the object, the connection still actually exists. And why that happens is basically if any packets were dropped on the way, it is standard that there should still be time for you to go back and take it. So that's why that even still exists, even after we even use it in our using statement. So the sockets connection still exists after we dispose the object. So they came up with HTTP client factory. What HTTP client factory now does is HTTP client factory once you add HTTP client factory to your, what they call it, your application, which I'm going to show how to do it. It is going to create a pool for you between you and that. So for example, me and Google, now we're about to communicate. If I'm using HTTP client factory, it is going to create a connection pool for me between me and Google. But what it does different from the normal HTTP client is the fact that it does not, what do you call it? It does not create a new one for every new time. Every time I'm trying to connect to Google again, it has like a basket whereby it stores connection between me and Google. And even after, so let's say I make a call to Google now and I stop, right? It doesn't kill the connection immediately. Even after, I think there are some seconds that after that time, it takes the game to an expired pool. And in that expired pool is where it will store it for a while again. I've forgotten how many seconds it keeps that connection. That means this connection will still be existing between me and Google. It keeps it for a particular while in that expired pool again, even after waiting for a while to see if I'm going to come back and use it. So if I'm having a system that is going to Google or a particular middleware several seconds, it is going to have just those existing connections that I've established between me and what they call it, Google, which means I'm not going to have socket exhaustion on my own side or Google side. Let's say Google has even taken care of socket exhaustion, then on my own side, I'm not going to have socket exhaustion. So they did HTTP client, and that resolved that problem for what they call the socket exhaustion. There are also other things that you could do with this HTTP client factory, which is basically there are some cross-cutting corners that you can use for using delegate handlers. I've seen it, and it's actually very nice. There's the part whereby you can log. So, for example, on the application I work on, it is required that you know the time you are calling. It's called an elapsed time. The time you call, how long it took you to get response from a particular service that you are calling, right? There is a solution for it that I am currently using, which is basically there is a request response login. But assuming I was not going to use Serilog request response login, I would use this HTTP client factory delegate handler to provide this solution, and I'll be able to log it. There are also other things that you can use that delegate handler for, which I think is very important. For there, you can do checks and check if an API key header is there and kill the session, kill the connection before it even starts. And that one is also very good. There's the part of using Poly also. So Poly helps you do retries. If you set some certain logics around it basically, and you'll be able to do retries if there are faults on it. That's also a very important part. Do you still understand me? Are you still hearing me, Sonny? Sorry.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
The only challenge is when you start running, you drop message. I didn't mean.
Okay, so the next thing I will do is basically, I think we should just start looking at how we can use HTTP client on the code itself. The first thing you would have to do is add, so this is basically .NET. If you were on JavaScript and all those other languages, I don't know how you would have done it, but I think it does if it exists. If it not, maybe someone will have to create the project itself and implement it. So if you are going to add it on .NET, you are just going to look for Microsoft.extensions HTTP. Okay. Okay, found it. So this is what you are going to install. Okay, so now that we have HTTP, what do you call it, HTTP client on our system, we can just add so you just go to your startup in your configure services, you add HTTP client. This is the simple way to do it. There are also other ways to add it as a named client. You can add a named client and you can add a type client. I think I'll show that also. But this one is just the basic one. Basically, this will just help you use HTTP client every time you want to call a particular service in your application. So we've added it here. Then we go to, I think for me, I will be working on our controller directly. From here, you would inject what they call it, HTTP client factory. From here, you will inject HTTP client factory. So we have HTTP client factory now in our code, and we can make calls. So basically now, every time we want to make calls, we can make calls with this. So can you see my screen?
Yes, it's.
All right.
I still see it.
Okay, no problem. So for this one, I'm just going to be calling Google. So for this one, all we'll do is just see how we can call a particular address. So for this is just basically showing how we can call what call a particular service, maybe Google. It also has posts and different ones, but from these ones we create the client, we can call any service we want and use it how we want. For example, I think I can show a real life scenario. I used it, no, but that one was typed. So for this, this is just when we are just using HTTP client itself. A better way we can also use it is using it as a named client. So as a named client is, for example, if you are calling a particular service several times that you know you use several in a particular application, you can name it from your controller already and it would work for you. So that one, for example, let me see how we can do that. Yeah, so and and other things. But why that one is good is because when you now want to use it in the application itself, you just write name of the named client that I've used. Okay. So for something like that, you would have something like this. Let's say we have so for that one, it's almost the same with this, but the difference is you do not have to do this. You do not have to. You do not have to type the name. All you have to do is just put Google's name here, GitHub's name here. So you have something like this. So for that one, once you create the client, you just write the name and you can now, so if you have like an endpoint that has, so this is the, you can see is the base address we have. So for example, if you have github.com slash fetch eligibility slash get loan address, such different things, all you have to do here is just write fetch eligibility. So this makes it very clean and is also better against the normal things I've said about HTTP Client Factory. But for me, it's also cleaner. So for example, if you're calling a particular middleware that has several what do you call it, services for you, endpoints for you, you will not have to, you are not going to write the base address anywhere in your code again. You're not going to write anything. All you will do is just do this and it will render it for you. So for this, it is very nice, and I think I can show a place I used it in real, like for a real application that is working. So, but for that one, I think I used it as a typed service. Sorry, I'm just looking for it. Sorry. I think I have to share that part. Yeah, let me first get it. Sorry. Okay, so I can share it. Okay, sorry, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so for this application now, it is an application that takes a lot of requests in where I'm working. So this is where I'm calling the application. Yeah, if you can see in line 2416. So I don't need to, there's no part here that I'm defining the URL of the base address of the application. This is just what I do. And I send the content and I still get response. So you can do this again. Remember that we have all the old advantages of the fact that we cannot go through socket exhaustion. So you can do something like this. You have the post there and it's also multi-threaded. So, but for this one, I used something called a typed client. I think I can show that one. So a typed client is something like this, whereby you would just when you're creating a constructor, you just inject the what do you call it, HTTP client itself. So I can inject different addresses to it. So for example, let me see when I did it. Sorry. Yeah, so for example, something like this, you'll be able to easily do it. Then you can read the response like this. It is easier that way, but you would have to register the type client also with the address in your startup. So for example, I think I did that here. Sorry. Yeah, so this is when I did it. Yeah, this is where I did it. So this is where you had your URL, just the way you normally had, what do you call it, inject services. Yeah, so you just, your URL is configured, then you can just inject it. So this is the base address. So again, if that service also is the client, you just add here. If that service has other headers, sorry, there are different things you can do. You can configure your timeout, you can do different things here in your startup. So you now have to do that in several places. For example, if I want my timeout to be configured at the beginning, yeah, it will do it all through every time I'm calling that particular service. So that also helps us. Then, let me see, sorry. Okay, yeah. I think I'll go back to the previous application. So that also helps us with this. So another thing we can do is also the fact that this can work with poly. And poly, I said, also helps us handle retries. So for example, I can configure my policy. Let me just show you. Then I also mention issues that can actually happen with that one that I think you should be careful of. So first we should before I even copy the code snippets, we should add poly to the project. So yeah, I think, yeah. So you have this Microsoft extension.http.poly. Then you can add poly itself. So once we've done that, we can come here. So let me just explain what this will do for people so for example, if there were issues when you were getting response from a particular service that you call, Poly can help you retry a particular configured number of times. So for me, that is very good, but it now takes me to the level so for example, where I thought it would be applicable for me was maybe if you are calling a service that is a GET, so that does not have audit IDs and all those type of things. Because to me, if you are trying to, for example, in real life scenario, if you're trying to debit a customer's account, I was thinking, oh, maybe I should call the service that helps you debit account, but you cannot call it twice. For example, if it has debited the customer's account before, I don't think you should do retry for that. So for things like that, I don't think you should try to configure retries for that. But for things that you maybe get customer details from I think that makes sense. To get customers details, there's no way that will give you issues. So if you've called the service and it gave an error, you can configure a number of times for it to be retried. So that makes more sense. So let me just copy the service before the code snippet that does that. So you can have something like this so this basically says you should handle, there are some types of errors called transient HTTP errors. So these transient HTTP errors are basically packets got lost. Then there's some basic, very little errors that can happen between you and a service that they are already defined in this transient HTTP error. There are different ones there. Sorry. There are different ones defined already there. You can see it. But there are different ones defined there. There are some HTTP response codes, 408, different ones, XXS, network failures also. So it will help you retry them 3 times and it would work for you. Let me see if there's any other thing today I'm not going, I think next time maybe I'll go into how to use delegate handlers to handle different things. There are also different things you can do with delegate handlers, whereby you can also even have your own middleware whereby you use HTTP clients or handle things before the request and request messages even going out, and before you get response messages. Then I think that one you can also, okay, there is this creation of no policy. So for that one, it helps me. For example, if you want to define the type of requests that you should apply this, or what they call it for, these policies for. So for example, what this part is showing is basically you create a no policy. You are saying you should not, don't try to retry for this type of, what they call it, services. So for example, what this is saying is if it is an HTTP GET method, you should use your retry policy, which you would have defined. Yeah. So you should retry anything that is a GET, but if it's not a GET, don't even try and do anything to it. So for me, if you have services that you define that they are all GETs and they will not create issues for you, you can definitely tell HTTP clients to retry it several times that you configure. But anything post for me that I'm going to, maybe for me now, maybe anything post, definitely don't try and retry it, or just leave it for me. I'll handle it in my service itself. So do you have any questions? Am I still connected? Yeah.
Yeah, you are. Thank you so much, Tunde. Thank you so much for this session on HTTP client and HTTP client factory. Does anyone have any question or contribution based on what has been shared with us, or any use case? You might have applied it somewhere and it's working very fine for you. You can throw more light. Any question or contribution will be very, very needed and helpful.
Lasisi is here. I saw Lasisi is here.
Yeah, Lasisi is here. Okay. Hi, Lasisi.
Yes,
yeah, don't give me the
work. So I think I did not give you the work. It's C# that gave us the work. So apart from these, you mentioned why this is a better option than using So from what I've seen about it, lots of benchmarks have been done to see that when you use it normally before we write using easy clients the using statement. So a new client, new connection, and everything has to be created. Anytime you're calling the API. So using this registration has always proven to be the best way. So the other thing I can add is this other extension. So they've put some extension on HTTP client. So you can do post JSON async and receive JSON async and put in your C# classes, type classes inside. So that you would, it makes it right to HTTP client does post JSON async and you put in your C# class there. It does a decision.
Oh, shit.
Okay. Sorry, Lasisi, are you saying someone has done the extension already?
Hello. I think
yes. Okay. It has been done. Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, you went off for some minutes or for some seconds.
Wait, is it better now in any way?
Yes, it's better now. Can you recap also?
So I would say there's an extension created, system.net.http.extension, if I'm correct. So it does, you can just do post JSON async and passing your C# classes, your type class into that method. Normally, we'll first deserialize to a string and post a string. Then when we get
string, that's what I'm going to say.
So an extension method has been written already that does that. So it basically lets you just write your stuff in 2 lines and you are done.
Okay, I think I would look if maybe I'll check it and I would maybe add it to this.
Yeah. I like that I've not been able to try poly because I don't want Wala.
I saw Poly looks like last it has a lot of trouble though.
No,
Yeah.
at least I like the fact that you can define the kind of operations you want Poly to perform the trials or retrials on. So you wouldn't just hey, this thing is breaking. Oh shit. Is it my network? Oh shit.
Oh, it's not my network, it's breaking also for someone.
Oh god. I think maybe it's Lasisi or so. Wow. The network is so terrible today. Maybe because of the rain that fell.
Yeah, Lassisi's network is terrible. Can you mute him? Maybe you would.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think. Hello, Lasisi, are you back? Hello? I think he just rejoined again. So.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah. So
I think what he was also saying was bullying. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
No, I think what he was saying about poly, the fear of poly, I also do have fear for poly, but I like the fact you can define it. So which is what I'm going to be using.
Exactly. Exactly. You can define what you want. I don't know if you can. I think it might have such configurations. Maybe define the operations by name, specifying the name of the endpoint or so. It might have such configurations because I think I've tried something.
Yes. So for this one, if you look at where I added, let me just show you something. Look at where I added this, for example, in a real, let me just show you something. Okay. For this one, when I added this GitHub clients, right? Yeah, I can do something like this.
Hello, are you there, Tunde? Oh, my net. Hello, Tunde, are you there? Or can anyone hear me? Oh, the network is just terrible today, man. Can anyone hear me?
Boss, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I can hear you.
I think it's just maybe it's Tunde's network because I can hear you. I can hear you clearly.
Okay.
I have to switch from my PC. I think anytime I'm using Zoom on PC, it's always slow.
Okay.
So my phone is always better for Zoom.
So I was saying, I think Poly has in the configuration. I think you can define the operations you want to.
Yeah. So most times, I try to use Poly with calls that are idempotent. Idempotent calls are calls that if you make the same call again, it would not. You will get the same response.
Yeah.
So that's why I used Poly for. Yeah. I've tried not to use that most times because I'm always careful. I try to make sure I undo everything gracefully for me.
Yeah.
I've not had use case for retrial like that because every application I work on, for the chatbot, for instance, I have to respond within less than 3 seconds. So I can't do a retry within 1 second. Like for me, it's just someone can't take.
Yeah, so what I was showing was for Sony. So if you see where I added this GitHub client, you can now specify the policy you want for GitHub. So you can now say for me now in real life scenario, I have like middleware, and I know that for my middleware, all the gets for the USSD middleware, all the gets are not they're idempotent services. So I can say you should do retry, but me, I also do not have time because like in how many milliseconds I have to respond. So I don't really need the whole retry, but for like applications, I think it's just to know that the fact that if you have a proper scenario for it, you can use it and you can specify the clients you want itself. It can also be typed. If it's a typed client you want, you can do it and specify the policy you want.
Yeah.
So the other thing I found interesting on HTTP clients is about delegate handler. So for my application, most times, I don't know if anybody has that issue. When you go production, then you see that you'll be having an issue. You don't know if it's on your application that is having the issue or on the third party you are calling, because you're having some exception, maybe some non-reference exception in your code. So I try to always log what I'm sending and what I receive,
Yeah.
like a string object. So in HTTP client, there is a middleware you can build. You can extend called delegate handlers. So it's like you can now do, on delegate handler has like a before you send the request and after you send the request method that you can implement. So I use that to log the request I'm sending. You can just use to put any logic before you send every request and any logic after, like any cross-cutting concern that you want in your HTTP pipeline. So things like logging, I log my exception too. For instance, if for a particular client, I want to send notification when exception is happening, I would, you can do that there. You can just do
Oh,
anything
yeah.
around, like you put a middleware around HTTP clients, basically.
Okay.
So it's used with delegate handlers. That's what I do too.
Okay. So you might not necessarily need to log at the point of making, let's say you want to implement, okay, before the call is made, log. When the call, after the call is made, log. You might not need to do that at the point of making the call to the service.
Yeah, anywhere your code is not done,
Okay.
just do that at one place, and all your
Okay.
HTTP clients are using that handlers. So any logic you are putting there, exception handling logic, login logic,
Yeah.
anything, visualizing logic, adding header, or maybe adding a particular kind of header to your client, you can always add that at that point in time. And
So
your code that you're now writing will be very clean.
yeah. So if you want to define, maybe like my pattern is before logging, before making the request, I log and I define the name of the operation I'm performing the log on. Let's say get customer. I'm trying to call the function. The function is get customer. So I'll log the name of the function and whatever request I'm sending, and the name of the function and the response I'm getting, right? So if you want to use the delegate to handle that, would you need to use reflection? How would you define, would you be able to log the name of the operation you're getting, or you're performing that call, or the name of the function where you're performing that API call from? Do you get me?
I've not had, because most times in my code, what I do is I always have a class that handle HTTP call.
Okay.
Yes, I get you, but most times in my code, I have just one HTTP client handler in my code that has post JSON, get JSON, put, get media and everything. I define there, and I just pass in my C# update, and I use it's a generic kind of put a response of T, get a response, put a request of T, get a response of U, something like that. So I'm always like, it always makes my code clean. So anyway, I'm calling an HTTP client, I just pass that there. But I'm sure in the object, because you will actually get the HTTP object in that delegate handler, you get the rate of what you want to send. So I'm sure there'll be a way to get the value you want. For me, I'm not always logging the class is coming from. What I log is the object itself and the endpoint I'm calling. That's why I log most times. So I can do, if I'm using sec or Elasticsearch, then I can now filter in my logs by maybe that delegate handler name, where endpoint starts with this.
Okay.
You know, you can write query in all this sec and all those stuff. So so I can just filter my log by that HTTP handler class, where the endpoint, the parameter I give my endpoint in my log when I'm using parameterized login. So I can say, okay, where the endpoint starts with HTTP 10 something, and it gives me all those stuff. And I can say, okay, if the log is type of error, for instance, I log so I can now filter, if it's exception, I'm logging it as error. So I can say, okay, give me every error that happened in my dependent HTTP call. So I can write all those kind of query and get all those logs based on that. But most times I don't, the method I'm calling from, because if I do that, if tomorrow I change the proxy, the infrastructure class, that would affect, that means I have to, maybe instead of calling, let me just access bank example, instead of calling ESB, I'm calling another internal API. And I have to do another different implementation for how to call that API. Or maybe instead of calling InterSwitch, I'm not calling Coral Pay for bill payments. And I have to do different implementation. So I'm being dependent on the class name that is calling the HTTP client. Most times I don't try to bother myself with that logic. But I'm sure that if we use the delegate handler, you're able to get every value.
You
At
might
least most
use
value.
reflection to.
Yeah, I try not to stay from reflection because
I'm telling you.
I've seen the benchmark on that is it's not that slow, but then if we're talking
But
of
it's the closest to name type itself.
yeah. So most times I try
But you
to
have to
stay.
reduce it. Yeah.
There are many patterns that make people like instead of getting class name, there are some patterns that would
Yeah,
make
there
it.
are logging patterns also and there's something called, again, I use, it's called Serilog request response. Then you can now use idiagonistic context. That one helps you even, I don't know if
So
you guys are using it.
why I don't like that stuff is because it makes my code tightly coupled to Serilog. I don't like it. So if you
Okay, I
check
get.
iLogger itself has begin scope where you can pass an I dictionary of string and object. That's what I use. So
Oh, okay.
Okay, you use the iLogger itself.
so the user statement, I try not to close the user statement, and for one point I worked on, I use it in the middleware. So I did the middleware before everything started, and I picked the object and I put it in the scope of the iLogger, and I check, and it came out in SQL. Everything was fine. So
Okay, I get what you're saying in terms of how I use it. Okay.
yeah, you're dependent on for instance, I don't like Serilog for some reason. I don't like it. It's good, and for me, I don't just like it because I have to import so many packages to do many.
Yeah.
They are light, but
Yeah.
then too many packages. Then after the package, I don't do that. I don't like it. If I like putting my log configuration in app settings or in a .config file, and on runtime basis, at least if I want to, maybe something is happening on my HTTP client. For instance, the log I did on my HTTP client is a debug log, so it won't show in my log normally because my minimum log level is information. It's when I want to see that there's an issue during runtime. I would need to, okay, let me take the class name of HTTP client handler and take the level to debug so I can see all the log
Yeah.
on that part and see what's wrong. Serilog, if you put your log configuration in app settings, it's a singleton, so you can't change it throughout the lifetime of your application.
Hey, boy,
You can
okay,
just
you can
restart.
restart it now. As in,
Yeah.
you can restart it now.
I don't want if you're doing a critical application, let's say you're having something that's talking to mobile app, and they say okay something is wrong, or maybe just switch service, and you want to just do a debug and see why it's
Okay, so
having
your
issue.
own need to update it immediately at runtime.
Yeah, normal iLogger.
Wow.
If you use normal
Okay.
iLogger, anything that speaks to iLogger, the login stuff picks it on at runtime immediately. The next log.
Okay, that's nice. That's nice.
Wow.
That's actually, especially for me, like for my own application, because I've had this issue before with what I'm even building now, and I found out how to move it to configuration like this thing
So
to move. But now,
though people say it's not like people still compare them with Serilog and they said, but I'm not concerned with the benchmark for that. It's nlog. Nlog has like just one light package, just one DLL is entering my application. And for my log config, just on the config file, I can do this request response. Like it captures everything already. I just do something in my stuff. I can get environmental variable, everything.
What's the name
All
of
those things
the
like
package?
nlog.
Nlog. Oh,
Like
okay.
yes, you know nlog.
Have
So I
you-
studied it for a while, and I saw that nlog is actually it makes my life easy. I don't have to import like once you have just nlog installed, you have lots of they call it appenders you can have, and it's more than sufficient for me.
Yeah, but really with Serilog, you can just have that Serilog. Why you add other things is because of seg. Let's say you want to use seg as your
So what I'm saying, nlog has everything. Just install one nlog and that's all. If I want to do request response, I can build that on one time. I don't have to go and write it in my middleware.
So it has an interface like sec where you can
So in
query.
the config file, you can just put it has variables that it's used to capture everything at
I get, yeah.
It captures everything for you normally. The machine name, everything you have to import, cellular.machine name, all those stuff.
But it logs it to a file. Does it have other options like
Yeah, like the application I built now, I use it for audit login, and I don't write any code, so it logs to my DB.
Okay, to your DB.
Yes, I just did like for this particular class. So one thing I like doing is, so for logs on particular class in my code, it logs to maybe sec, some log to app inside, some will log to DB. So I did the middleware and I said, okay, for any log that is in that middleware, log it to database. If I want to do that in sec, I have to start writing a lot of those that are when and if statement, and it's too long.
Yeah.
Though it's fine, I decided sec is powerful, but then the lot of work I would have to do to configure it is just overwhelming for me. I want to focus on my code and not start knowing how to log and everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe so. I think someone should cover logging on a particular different day. It's what I've seen. It looks like a whole lot that we need to discuss.
I think that would make sense for logging to be handled.
Because it's very important in our
very
application.
Important,
so
really. It's
I
very. I've played around with I've played around with nlog, but I didn't know they now have because I know they have the database option, which for me, logging to the database, I don't want to.
It's very important for me. It is very important. So like I'm doing it manually now. So now that Lassie has mentioned something, I think look at it.
Serilog has everything. Just that you have to import everything into your application.
They have it as different packages.
Yeah.
That's
so if I'm
which makes sense though. Anyone you want.
I've seen them like it's always maybe like 5 kilobytes, 4 kilobytes. But please,
yeah.
I think there are different ideas to it. There are different people, different options. So, like for example, Lassie prefers everything in one place, which makes most likely the nlog will be heavier. Then this
kilobyte or 81. It's not that heavy, though, but I just like that. The Serilog as everybody's looking for Serilog nowadays. Like if you go
because
online,
of the tooling now, it makes sense. It makes sense.
I think why? Because Serilog came with the option of
the central
miniaturized login. Yeah.
Okay.
Login,
Okay. Yeah.
First, it came with it. Was the first to come in markets with that structured login. So everybody just went with it straight up.
Okay, so I think we've covered a lot. I think logging should be taken as, I don't know, if maybe
really
one of us.
I think if
look into it, sharp.
Yeah, that would make next week. I'm thinking of the guy hasn't accepted though. Somebody from Microsoft who might be.
Wow. Okay.
He hasn't yet accepted though. I don't know. So I have one lady or one guy, anyone that works fine. But if none of them responds before the next session, then we might need to handle the login. Lasisi, just have it in mind in case I beg, yeah. In case, let's just. It might be in 2 weeks time. It might be in 2 weeks time, not because most likely I will try to persuade any of them to accept coming on board next week. But if that doesn't work out, then Lasisi, please just in case. Don't worry, we'll talk offline.
All right, thank you.
Before then. All right.
Okay, sir.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. It was really a wonderful session. Tunde, we really appreciate this session on HTTP client and factory. Really All right, let's have a wonderful week. Enjoy your coding. Sure, you guys are not going to. It's sure that one of these days we'll go share our screen, almost see our face itself. Because there are some guys I haven't seen since March. One of these days it wouldn't be so that we'll know if it's bot. Say who knows whether it's Lasisi's bot that is interacting with us. so, so
Okay, that's fine.
one of these days we go share our screen. Let's see our faces and hang out, have a different hangout. So, but let's
Yeah, I think last time we did it with Kenny's time, during Kenny's time, so no problem.
yeah. All right. Do
All
have
right.
a wonderful
Yeah.
weekend and a wonderful week ahead, guys.
All right, thanks a lot.